So today, guys, we're going to be answering the only question that people actually care about in this game, let's be honest. What DPS are good in Ulduar Phase 2? So I've made an updated tier list based on Warcraft log data, also based on the top 5% players in the game across, all of the bosses. But we're also going to look at what DPS are pumping on a boss-to-boss basis, because there's interesting things to talk about in that regard. Now, there's a reason why I don't make tier lists anymore before the raiders come out. Very simply, I do not have a time machine. There's absolutely no way to get an accurate tier list before the raid actually comes out, because you're really just going off PTR data, which, first of all, is inaccurate, and it also just simply isn't quantitative enough to get accurate results, because only a few guilds actually care about raiding on the PTR. So when you see a tier list before the raid actually comes out, you really have to take it with a pinch of salt, because it is, at the end of the day, field crafting. So this tier list here is based on data from the first week of Ulduar. I imagine in a month's time, when people are more comfortable with mechanics and have the raid on farm, things will change again, and again we'll make another video when that day comes. But this is how DPS have been performing in Ulduar on this first week. I think things are very different to what people predicted. A lot of people were putting Rogue in S tier, that may come at a later date, and they're probably putting Fire Mage in A tier, but Fire Mages are performing extremely well already. A lot of people also predicted the Arcane Mage to be better than the Fire Mage. On a certain fight, they are, but overall the Fire Mage is crawling ahead. And when I put Frost in front of Unholy here, it really is just an absolute hairline. They really are just as good as each other. I also think Survival and Shadow performing a bit more better than people expected, and also the Combat Rogue performing worse than what people expected. But the Combat Rogue is a very scaling class. Again, when I make this video in a month's time, I reckon the combat will crawl up the table just a little bit. And yeah, another weird thing is some people have been messing about with Frost Mage. I have no idea why, but that's what the log data tells me, and even a Frost Mage is better than a Ret Paladin apparently. This is obviously where I'm getting the data from. As you can see, the Frost DK and Unholy DK on this chart, there's such a little difference between them, it really isn't worth talking about. But this is based on the top 5% of players, people who have passed a 95 or higher. Obviously, when you change this percentile to be lower, the data is very different, but then we're basing this data on much less skilled players, and therefore it is much less accurate to get into the bottom of what classes are actually pumping in the hands of, well, the best person to handle the class. By the way, guys, if you're liking the video so far, please like and subscribe, that really does help out. And for those guys out there who were interested in old school MMOs, I made a video recently about the original vanilla Lord of the Rings Online. There's an interesting private server project out there that's attempting to bring back vanilla Lord of the Rings Online, so you'll find that linked in the description also. But anyway, let's move on. It is also important to note, guys, that Ulduar is a very varied kind of raid when it comes to the diversity in mechanics and situations, and therefore, when you look on a boss-to-boss basis, honestly, every single boss you look at, there's different DPS at the top most of the time. I mean, Affliction Warlocks are normally at the top, but even just look here at Ignis, we have the Assassination Rogue on the top. Now, I'm not an expert on Assassination Rogue, but I'm presuming this has to do with the fact that you can actually tank mechanics with Cloak of Shadow. As we can see on Razor Scale, the Unholy DK crawls up, probably because there's only a short time window for you to DPS the boss, which is favourable to our Gargoyle Snapshot. Probably also why the Arcane Mages crawled up there, because they only have a short burst window before they obviously run out of mana and have to start using mana regeneration abilities. On the Assembly of Iron, Unholy DK being left in the dust on this fight, probably because it's quite a long one. And then Affliction Warlock obviously going to dominate on this fight because they have multiple execute phases. The Enhancement Shaman right now is actually performing very well on Kologam, partly because of Fire Nova just cleaving to all of the arms and the boss. Unholy DK doing also quite well here because obviously they can spread their dots with Pestilence, but very interestingly, the Affliction Warlock does actually have the highest pass on this encounter, and the pass is I think it's 1.5k DPS higher than the other classes, and it's because it's from Bipolar, obviously the best passing guild in the game right now. Demonology Warlock and the Survival Hunter are performing very well on Cat Lady. Now, Demonology Warlock is constantly cleaving with their Felguard, so that's just going to give them a bit of a boost. And it looks like the Survival Hunter is doing some interesting things with Volley and the Explosive Trap spell. Fire Mages are absolutely killing it on Hodor by a country mile, as you can see. And this is because obviously they get that crit buff, Storm Power, and crit is just stupidly good for Fire Mages because it means more hot streaks, which means more instant Pyroblasts. On the forum, we've got Assassination Rogue dominating again up there with the Affliction Warlock and Death Knights. Demonology Warlock is also pumping slightly better on Freya. This is obviously most likely because of the AoE like we talked about earlier. We've got the Felguard cleaving. And looking at the logs, a big part of their damage is also coming from Immolation Aura when they obviously jump into Metamorphosis. Now, Frost DK getting ahead of Unholy DK here, partly because the ads are just not alive for that long. Like, Unholy great for this fight, but, you know, Frost DK, they're probably going to squeeze in more damage very quickly with their Howling Blasts. And now moving on to Mimiron, and there's really no surprises here. So obviously the Affliction Warlock can spread their dots onto 3 different targets, well, effectively 3 different main targets on the last phase, and the Fire Mage can do the same thing with their Living Bombs. And the same reason why, you know, the Frost DK was pumping on the last boss, their Howling Blasts are going to hit 3 different targets on that last phase. I mean, Holy DK also doing really well because they can spread their dots to every single target also. Casters are also absolutely dominating on General, which is to absolutely no surprise. They just simply get better buffs on this fight. And Frost Mage, Arcane Mage right at the top with the Elemental Shaman, rather interestingly, here being ahead of the Warlocks and also the Shadow Priest. I mean, as you can see here on the front page, we have Arcane Mages, we have Shadow Priests, and we have Elemental Shamans. And even a Balance Druid, somehow. I think it makes a lot of sense, to be honest, because obviously these casters here spend most of their time doing their DPS through casting, and this buff increases their casted speed, whereas obviously the Warlocks focus more on dots. By the way, I should clarify, I have no idea why the Frost Mage is up there. I think it's probably just because only 3 people have passed as a Frost Mage, so it is making the data here, in this case, a bit ski-whiff. Future MetaGoblin tuning in here. Actually, the reason why Frost is appearing on the logs is because of the Frostfire Bolt spec, so those particular people may have just spec'd that much deeper into the Frost spec, and therefore it's just incorrectly appearing on Warcraft logs. When Yogs are on, we see the Fire Mage going a little bit higher than the Warlocks here, and the Holy DK getting a little bit higher of Frost Mage. This is to be expected. I mean, the Fire Mage has now multiple targets to put their Living Bombs on, which again just increases the chance for hot streak procs to happen, so it's very nice for them. And on Algalon, we see Frost DK is absolutely dominating, the Assassination Rogue, Affliction Warlock, and a Holy DK. So, as you can see, things are very, very different when you look on a boss-to-boss basis. It really is quite a shuffle. Personally, I think this is a nice thing to see. This is even coming from an Unholy DK, because obviously in Phase 1, Unholy DK just dominated in all fights because the fights were nice and short and just perfect for Unholy DK. It's nice to see different classes excelling on different fights. This is how the game should be, really. It shouldn't be totally like imbalanced where just one DPS totally dominates every single fight like it has been in Phase 1, and let's be honest, the most of Classic WoW. In Wrath of the Lich King Classic, classes do get a little bit more interesting, a bit more diverse, and just generally a bit better balanced than the previous expansions. But anyway guys, that's where we're going to end the video there. Until my next video, ciao.